Pope Francis has just excommunicated another priest for maintaining that he, Pope Francis, is not actually the Pope. Stick around to find out more.
Oh man, oh man, oh man.
So we've seen this before. I've said it many, many times here on the show. Based on the Code of Canon Law, Canon 751, those who commit acts of schism are automatically excommunicated according to the code of the church. And schism here is defined as a refusal to submit to the Pope or the bishops in communion with him. So when a person says that Pope Francis isn't the Pope, they are very likely automatically excommunicated. There's some mitigating factors here and there where a person might say this and actually be exempt from an automatic excommunication penalty, but in reality, especially given how much information there is out there already, it's very unlikely. So when a priest comes out and says, and emphatically says, Pope Francis is not the Pope, well, he automatically excommunicates himself. Now, you might have the Pope who comes back and just confirms that, but in reality, it's the person who denies that Francis is the Pope who actually excommunicates themselves. Francis doesn't actually have to excommunicate them. They have already excommunicated themselves. So when we say that Pope Francis has excommunicated them, well, that's a very short and maybe even imprecise way of saying that the papacy has confirmed that this person has been excommunicated because they have committed an act of schism. And so this needs to be a warning for everybody who is saying that Francis isn't the Pope. There are bishops, in some cases, there are content creators, there are professors who are saying that Francis isn't the Pope and Benedict never actually resigned. And they're in pretty popular circles right now. Well, according to the Vatican, they're excommunicated. They're not Catholics. They're not Catholics in good standing. And they shouldn't be coming to Catholic churches and receiving communion until they repent and rectify their situation with the church. We saw this with Vigano. I called it out a year before the Vatican confirmed his excommunication, a year to the very day. I came here on YouTube and told everyone Vigano has already excommunicated himself because I showed where Vigano was saying that Francis isn't the Pope. 1 year later, to the very day, the Vatican came out and confirmed Vigano excommunicated himself because he denies that Francis is the Pope. Okay, so let's take a look at this new situation. And there's actually, looks like there's two priests who were just excommunicated. We're going to look at the situation, especially of one of them. Let me share my screen. Let's see what's going on here. Pope Francis laicizes schismatic Argentine priests. So not only excommunicated, he's also been formally laicized. I heard the news yesterday that he had been excommunicated. I wasn't aware he also went through the laicization process. That just came out, to my knowledge. Laicization, for those who are not familiar, is this concept that a person who is ordained, they're always sacramentally ordained, right? They have that indelible mark. They'll always be a priest, but they can't licitly or lawfully function as a priest. So they can't celebrate Mass daily. So though they have that ability, that potential, they're not to exercise it unless there's like some situation where a person is dying. In that case, they can maybe absolve somebody of sins. But other than that, they don't have faculties to absolve people, and they're not to celebrate the liturgy. They're not even to present themselves as a priest. You know, we saw this in the case of Cardinal McCarrick when he was laicized. Well, he's still a priest, right? I mean, he still has that indelible mark. He's still a bishop as far as the sacramental character is concerned, but he can't present himself as one. And he can't act as one. He can't function as one. He can't celebrate the liturgy or anything like that. Well, that's what's going on with this one. Because he has already excommunicated himself for the sin of schism, they also went ahead and went through the process of laicizing him. So it's very clear that this priest is not in good standing. with a supreme and definitive decision. Pope Francis expelled from the clerical state for the crime of schism Fernando Maria Cornet, an Argentine who served as a priest in the Archdiocese of Sassari, Italy. Cornet, 57, wrote a book titled Habemus Antipapum, which means we don't have a pope, or we have an anti-pope. In this case, question mark, do we have an anti-pope? Published in 2023 by the publishing house Edizioni del Faro, the Argentine newspaper La Nación reported. In his book, Cornet asserts that Pope Benedict XVI's resignation was invalid, and consequently, so was the election of Pope Francis. So we've heard this for quite a while. You know, I've combated this schismatic claim that Francis isn't the Pope and Benedict actually, was the Pope and didn't actually successfully resign. I got dozens of videos refuting that nonsense. Benevacantism, as it's called. And I said, hey, look, when Benedict dies, all of these benevacantists are going to become sedevacantists overnight because they don't, Benedict's not alive anymore and they don't believe Francis is alive. So they're going to say Francis isn't the Pope and, Benedict isn't alive and Francis isn't the Pope. Therefore, there is no Pope right now. And in fact, they have become sedevacantists. Now, many of them don't own up to that name. They dishonestly change the meaning of the word sedevacantism, which just means that the see is empty. And they redefine it to mean, oh, in order to be called a sedevacantist, you have to say that you believe there hasn't been a pope since John the 23rd, the guy who opened the Second Vatican Council. It's a very dishonest and deceptive tactic because that's a kind of sedevacantist, but that's not sedevacantism per se. If you just simply say that there is no pope, that's sedevacantism. So for instance, when Pope Francis dies, every single Catholic in the world will be a sedevacantist. Every single Catholic in the world. You'll even see signs in Catholic churches that will say sedevacante whenever you walk in them. Because the see is empty. Chair is empty. Until another pope is elected, and then all faithful Catholics then become, followers of the pope and are no longer sedevacantists. Okay, so we've seen this tactic before where people come up with bogus claims to say that the resignation was invalid. I got videos debunking those here if you want to check them out. So we've seen this before, right? In announcing the decision, the Archbishop of Sassari, Gianfranco Saba, urged the community to pray for the unity of the church. The members of Christ must not be in conflict with each other. All those who form his body must each fulfill their office so that there may be no divisions, he said. The Archdiocese also announced that the vicar of the historic urban center subzone, Father Antonio Canu, will serve as parish administrator of St. Donatus and St. Sixtus in Sassari. He will be assisted in his ministry by the priests of Contalengo, who already work in the historic center, and other priests present in the pastoral district, the Archdiocese added. The statement dated November 13th, signed by the Chancellor of the Archdiocese, Father Antonio Spano. According to La Nación, in mid-May, a letter from the Vatican asked Cornet to withdraw the book from circulation. The book where he's saying Francis is an anti-pope. Withdraw the book from circulation, to publicly declare that it had errors, and to ask for forgiveness and to recognize Pope Francis as a legitimate pope. Of course, he did not do that. So, automatically excommunicated, and they went ahead and initiated the laicization process. Let that be a warning too. All of those bishops right now who are flirting right now with sedevacantism, we know who they are. We've seen them. Let that be a warning to all those content creators who flirt with sedevacantism. Let it be a warning to all those professors who still maintain that Benedict didn't actually resign, and therefore Francis isn't the Pope, and are going on crusades trying to convince people of this stupidity. Let that be a warning to them. They're not in good standing with the church. They are excommunicated. They are not Catholics. And let it not only be a warning to them, let it be a warning to you that those people are not Catholics. And when you see it and you see them dishonestly claiming they're Catholics and dishonestly and deceptively redefining what it means to be a sedevacantism so that they claim that they're not a sedevacantist, you can call them out in the same way that you would call out a man who claims that he's a woman and a man who says he can get pregnant. That's what they're doing with the word sedevacantism. It's the same dishonest tactics. However, the now former priest said he couldn't do so because that's not how things are. And also because no one from the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith was able to explain to me what the errors in my books are. No one ever gave me an argument. sounds a lot like Luther, right? None of y'all were able to refute me, even though he was refuted. This is what a schismatic does. Cornette foresaw that he would incur this sentence and stated that for writing his book, he was going to be persecuted by someone who had illegitimately occupied a place that didn't belong to him, throwing the church into crisis with illegitimate decisions and illegitimate appointments of bishops. This is what's called gaslighting. You create a problem, you create disruption, you create confusion, and then whenever you get judged for it, and you get punished for it, then you just all of a sudden pretend that you're the victim and you're a victim of someone else persecuting you. And that person's the one causing confusion and that person's the one illegitimate and so on and so forth. All right. So another one here talks about it. In addition to another priest, here is the priest in question, Cornette. Well, no longer a priest, right? Two clerics in Italy, one formerly a diocesan priest and the other a member of a religious order, have been sanctioned recently for the crime of schism, as both have publicly argued that Pope Francis was never validly elected and thus constitutes an anti-pope. So if you're saying that Francis is an anti-pope, and you're not saying that there is a valid pope right now, you're a sedevacantist, right? And also, if Francis is the Pope and you're saying Francis is an anti-Pope, you're clearly not submitting to his authority. You're clearly guilty of the crime of schism, Canon 751. And it's morally certain that Francis is the Pope. None of the cardinals who elected him have come out and said, hey, guys, actually. And not only that, all of the arguments that they have used to say that he isn't the Pope have completely failed. Don't hold water. And the Catholic doctrine of universal and peaceful acceptance has long been established. When Francis was elected, the world embraced him as Pope. End of story. That is a Catholic doctrine. When the world embraces this figure as Pope, even if they were illegitimately elected, they're now elected. They're now the Pope because the world has received him. The world of Catholics all throughout the world. And if that has happened because the faithful can't be deceived as a whole, then he is the Pope. Glory, hallelujah, in the chat says the Pope is a false teacher. Well, by what standard do you say that? You know, Luther said the same thing, right? But how do you determine that? Your personal interpretation of theology? Your private interpretation of scripture in the magisterium? We're back to Protestantism whenever we go down that road. Okay, so let's continue. Archdiocese of Sassari on the Italian island of Sardinia announced on November 13th that Fernando Maria Cornette, a native Argentinian, has been dismissed from the clerical state by order of Pope Francis. Meanwhile, reports also suggest that Father has been dismissed from the Discalced Carmelites. I'm sorry, Father Giorgio Maria Fare, this is a second priest, has been dismissed from the Discalced Carmelites after a deadline imposed by the order's leadership from renouncing his positions past, and he too may soon be facing a laicization procedure. Both men have privately expounded the theory of Francis's illegitimacy. Cornette did so last year in a book titled We Have an Anti-Pope, Investigations in Honor of the Truth. I love how people couch lies as the truth. Interesting the way that works. While Farr laid out his views in a booklet titled I Won't Deliver the Lion. and reaffirmed them in a YouTube video. Imagine that. Imagine. Huh. That's a wild thing. People disseminating sedevacantism on YouTube? I've never heard of such a thing. All right. In essence, both suggested that due to irregularities in the 2013 resignation announcement of Pope Benedict XVI, Francis was never validly elected Pope, and that various doctrinal errors and deviations during his papacy have confirmed the point, despite the fact that Benedict himself came out multiple times and explicitly said that he validly resigned, and the stupidity that he is still the Pope is just that, despite him saying that multiple times. Bergoglio is not the Pope and never has been, the priest said in a video posted in mid-October. Moreover, he has fallen into various heresies, something which proves his election is invalid on the basis of the infallibility of the Pope. Did he really say that? His understanding of infallibility is that bad, and he's a priest. All right. How many magisterial interventions of an infallible character has Pope Francis offered? Hint, 0. So you can't try to use that as somehow proof that he isn't the Pope, because he hasn't offered any. This has nothing to do with papal infallibility. You gotta love it when when they reveal themselves as frauds theologically. It's just they bury themselves. I mean, you don't even have to refute this stuff, right? I mean, anybody who's well catechized can already see. Oh goodness, I can't believe he was a priest with this kind of poor catechesis. Okay. The cardinals created prior to 2013 must intervene for safeguarding the church and convoke a conclave for proclaiming a new pope. The cardinals who currently believe that Francis is the pope, you want them to say that Francis isn't the pope? And there is a heresy known as conciliarism, right? Just saying. And I've seen people try to offer some kind of nuanced position to say, well, you could have an imperfect ecumenical council, and technically this isn't conciliarism. But you have to make so many qualifications to that it really turns into a very difficult position to maintain. Much more difficult than anything I've ever presented on this channel known as Pope-splaining. Let that sink in. Okay, so it continues. Cornette made more or less the same argument in his book. Just as there cannot be two churches of Christ which are simultaneously true, there also cannot. Okay, maybe there's a typo here. There are also cannot simultaneously be two true popes. Okay, the Pope is one, and the other. He cannot be anything other than an anti-pope. I wonder if this is like a Google Translate or something, because that doesn't make sense. The Pope is one, and the other, he cannot be other than an anti-pope. Okay, who's that Pope today? Because Benedict isn't alive. So you say Francis is an anti-pope, and Benedict isn't alive. You're saying that there isn't a Pope right now. So you're a sedevacantist. And Francis is the Pope anyway. So either way, that's schism. Okay. Strikingly, both Cornette and Fair had fairly distinguished ecclesiastical pedigrees before their fall from grace. I don't believe it. Cornette, in addition to serving as pastor at several parishes in Sardinia, has degrees in theology and patristics from the prestigious Augustinian Patristic Pontifical Institute in Rome. Well, as some of my professor friends tell me, getting a degree from some of these pontifical institutes, such as the one in question, isn't really impressive anymore. And I think that this is proof. As well as a degree in linguistics and culture from the University of Caesarea. Because linguistics and culture will totally prepare him for this conversation. He's the author of several books, including a 2011 work tracing his family's history from its roots in Sassari to its arrival in Argentina, and a 2015 collection of essays on St. Cyprian, Augustine, and Ambrose. St. Cyprian, Ambrose, and Augustine. Fair is also a published author, including a 2019 book on the Mass, for which the foreword was penned by Spanish Cardinal Lovera, who served as the Vatican's top theological official under Pope Benedict XVI. And the guy actually uses the case and the claim that, and the argument that Benedict didn't actually resign, despite the fact that Benedict kept saying that he has resigned. I honestly have some serious concerns about these places of higher education these days. I really do. Well, I'll put a link in the show notes to the rest of it, but that's effectively it. This is pretty wild stuff. Let me take a look at the chat and see what's going on there. Paul says Bishop Schneider attacks Pope Francis as teaching against the deposit of faith. That is heresy. Not just that, but Bishop Schneider does actually hold to several heresies, as I've shown on this show. He does deny papal supremacy. He will say he won't. I mean, in the same way that people redefine terms to the point that they say a woman, can be a man and a man can be a woman. But if you use correct definitions and don't redefine terms, he does hold to some heretical views on papal supremacy, condemned by the Council of Trent and the First Vatican Council. Benjamin said Satan had a pretty high position before his fall too. Glinda says, here's the thing with disagreeing with the Pope, nothing ever good comes from it. Well, and I also would say there's a difference between disagreeing and dissent. There is plenty of room for disagreement in the non-magisterial comments of Pope Francis. You're welcome to disagree with those. Now, whenever he teaches, dissenting or even accusing him of heresy, or even worse, just saying he is the Pope and denying his authority, those are different issues, right? Are they taught ecclesiology? Yes, but unfortunately, not in any meaningful way, in a very superficial way, and that's what's unfortunate. And it's evident if you start to quiz them on questions related to the magisterium, or the indefectibility of the church. Has there been over 30 antipopes? I think I read that somewhere. Yes, there has. But what does that have to do with today's conversation? The possibility of an antipope is not denied by really anybody. The fact or the claim that Francis is an antipope, that's what's the problem. So it's not that there could be an antipope, it's that there is no legitimate reason to say that Francis is an anti-pope, and there's overwhelming evidence to say that he is the Pope, to the point that there's no legitimate excuse to say otherwise. So Thomas says Bishop Schneider definitely criticizes things Pope Francis does, and he does not reject Pope's authority himself, since he is not a heretic, unlike the Italian priest. That's false. He does reject the Pope's authority. He explicitly says the Pope does not have the authority to modify the liturgy, and he says that multiple times. I've shown that here on this channel. That's heretical. That is anathematized by Vatican I, and that is contrary to dogma per the Council of Trent. So you can see where the Council of Trent has said this. Said this. I've shown it right here on the channel, and also Vatican I in its document Pastor Eternus. I believe it's session 3 where they do Pastor Eternus, right? Is it session 3 or session 4? And I think chapter 3. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look, but the document Pastor Eternus at Vatican I. It does very clearly show that he has this authority in matters of discipline and governance, not just matters of faith and morals. So to deny that he has the authority to adapt a liturgy, which he and, of course, Paul VI did with the Novus Ordo, is to deny papal supremacy. You can say you believe papal supremacy, but you've redefined what it means. So it's like Luther, who says he's a Catholic, but he redefined what Catholic means. It doesn't matter. I mean, you can say you're a Catholic all day long. If you redefine what it means, it doesn't matter if you say it. You're still a heretic. So you can say you hold to papal authority, but you've redefined and limited papal authority. I mean, Eastern Orthodox say they hold the papal authority, but they redefine what the extent of that authority. And they will embrace heresy and deny papal supremacy. But they'll still say, hey, we hold to papal authority. They just, again, redefine it in a way that violates the ecumenical councils. But this is the kind of show game they play. This is the kind of dishonest tactics that they play. And this is one of the reasons why it's a little bit more nefarious, because they make themselves look like they're traditional and Orthodox. In reality, they're heretics. Okay. Still looking through the chat. See a lot of comments, but I'm looking for any questions in particular. If there were any questions related specifically to the video. The guy doesn't know what an anti-pope is. How did he find a publisher? Well, usually when we speak of an anti-pope, it's while there is a legitimate pope and then there's another guy claiming to be pope and he's not. That's an anti-pope. I suppose you could speak of somebody being an anti-pope when there currently isn't a legitimately elected pope. But that would be a pretty rare case, and it wouldn't be one that applies to today. So, but just steel manning his position, I imagine that's what he would say. Could you give me examples, if any, of how people would rectify their situation after being a schismatic? Yes, you would go to confession, specifically to a bishop. You would need to go to a bishop. He has the ability, according to the Code of Canon Law, to lift those faculties. The bishop could designate those faculties to a priest. Whether he has with your local priest, I don't know. You would need to contact your diocese. But the bishop certainly has the authority to lift that canonical penalty. And also, if you don't go to the bishop and you just explain it to your local priest, who doesn't ordinarily have the faculty to lift that penalty, you could let him know of your situation, and the priest could go ahead and lift the penalty, with the provision that within a few weeks, I think the Code of Canon Law specifies, within a few weeks, you go to the bishop, and the bishop rectifies the situation. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Well, I think I grabbed everything that is related to this stream, so we'll go ahead and end it there. Thank y'all so much for watching. I hope this was helpful in bringing this not only to your attention, but also giving you some perspective on this, in the event and likely event that you will be hearing others who continue and likely will continue to say that Francis isn't the Pope. Be aware, the Vatican is very, very clear on this point. These people are excommunicated, and in the case of priests, looks like they're laicizing them as well. So again, I hope this was helpful. Everybody hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. See you tomorrow. God bless. Hey everyone, check out the new website I just created, Center for Theological Research. You can find it at ctresearch.org. Here you'll find my courses that I offer on the 7 ecumenical councils, the theological notes, what is dogma versus Catholic doctrine, what is heresy, what is offensive to pious ears, and various other theological censures. And also my course, Logical Fallacies and Apologetics, where I talk about various logical fallacies that you can find in apologetic arguments. You'll also find several ebooks that I have right here for free. Top 10 Lies About Pope Francis Exposed and Church Chaos, Biblical Insights for Confused Catholics. You can download those 2 resources for free. You don't have to pay me anything. Those are for you, for your own benefit. But check out those courses if that sounds like something that you would benefit from. And also check in frequently, as I will be creating new courses very soon. Simply visit ctresearch.org.